Welcome back, class. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for all those who are actively participating each week. I know some of you are very dedicated in doing some of these, and so really appreciate it. Again, this Wednesday is the last day you can turn in redo assignments, fixes, and all that good stuff. You probably already have emails from me about it if you are taking advantage of trying to boost your scores. But we're going to be jumping into matrices, and today what we're doing is we're going to be going through and how to solve systems. That's the last topic I want to do, and it's kind of a lengthy one. I think I got 5 problems picked out, and I'll kind of show you the basics here. I may not go through every step with every problem, but I want to show you kind of how we do it. Now, the way that I'm going to teach you is the way that I learned at college. There's multiple different ways, so don't feel like this is the only way, because trust me, like in math, there's always 3 or 4 different methods you can use. I like this method. It's very clean, it's very organized. A lot of the times in this video, I probably will not be going into the iPad where it's showing my face, because you're going to need all the screen real estate you can get. But I'll try to show you as much work as we can. This will show you kind of the power of a matrix, and you can see how to solve with it. And this is kind of how it's pre-programmed in a calculator. So the new topic is going to be called an augmented matrix. Now let's go to the iPad here. What you're looking at is the same kind of outline we've been doing the last week or two, and so the idea is that a matrix still has 1 row or 2 rows or 3 rows, whatever you have, and then so many columns. An augmented matrix will just have an extra column, and then what they do is they put a line in it. So maybe you have 3 columns, but that 3rd column is the augmented column. That's usually where the answers are. And I'll explain that here in a little bit. But let's jump right in. So we're going to be using a matrix to solve this system that you're looking at here. Now I'm going to get rid of my face here in a second. And then you can kind of see the math that we're involved here. So, alright, so we're going to make these augmented matrices. So, to make this an augmented matrix, I'm going to write it like this. Like that. And then the bottom one, I'm going to write like this. Now, what we are trying to do is we are trying to solve for x and y. This is a system. You've done these in Algebra 1 class, Algebra 2, and maybe even in pre-calc when we did systems. And so what we're going to try to do is solve for x and y. I just made, if you see, the leading coefficients are the numbers in the matrix. And what we're going to try to do is try to reduce this thing. I'm going to do a bunch of work here, just so you can see it. I'm going to try to clearly label with like little notes and stuff on to get it to this form. Okay, and we get numbers over here. Now, what you're looking at here, this is called the identity matrix. This is what I want to get my answers to, this thing right here. Because it's basically saying that this is x, this is y, and these are the answers that go with it. That's what I want to get to. Now, how we do that is the tricky part. That's the part that I've kind of warned you, it'll take a lot of effort. These are not going to be clean, pretty numbers. I'm going to probably have to refer to a calculator every once in a while just to show you kind of what we're doing here. So it's kind of interesting when we see it. So I'm going to try to show you the best that I can. Alright, let's jump right in here and let's start talking about this. So everything I'm going to do will not affect my answer. It'll just change my matrix look so that it will eventually solve. Now, I know you're thinking, Ward, I can solve this pretty quick. We learned about this stuff. But this is how a matrix can do it. In fact, why I'm showing you this is because most graphing calculators can do this automatically. You can just type in the little code that you type in your calculator is called RREF. That's called a reduced Row-Echelon form. It's a way of just automatically in a calculator reducing the matrix that you see here, this augmented one, and it will automatically solve it. In the next second, I'll just spit out the answer. It's really kind of clever, but I want to show you what it's doing, and then show you kind of how we type this in. And we're going to talk about a couple different things, and maybe even in one of the prompts, I'll just automatically type it in the calculator, and you can see it. All right, but this is the process what the calculator is doing in the background. Okay, what it will do first, it'll make the first row. The first row, if you know what that means, that's this row, it's going to put a 1 in the front. So right now it's currently a 2 in that top left corner. I want to make it a 1. Now how you do that is you do this. You cut the entire row 1 in half and replace row 1. These are my little notes to myself. I'm cutting row 1 in half and replacing row 1 with that. It's not affecting my answer because I'm going to do it to everything. So Cutting the first number in half, that's a 1. Cutting the second number in half, that's 1.5. Cutting the next number in half, that's 5.5. Ooh, not 5.6, 5.5. So 5.5. There we go. All right, that's the first row. Now, at the same time, now that this is my new first row, I'm going to replace the second row. And how I'm going to do that? Now, hopefully you're paying attention here. I'm going to do a little bit of math here. And I'm using this new row we just created. So this is the row that I'm using. So don't go back to the original 2, 3, 11. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. And this is where it gets a little tricky. And this is the stuff you can do. I'm going to do what they call a linear combination. I'm going to take the new row 1. This is my new row 1. I'm going to take it times 3. I'm going to add it to row 2 and replace row 2. So I'm taking 3 times row 1, the new row 1, and I'm going to add it to row 2. And what that'll do, so watch how this works. So if I take this row right here and I'm going to change my color, and change this number, take it times 3, and then add it to row 2, which is that thing, it'll make a 0 right here. That's what I want. That's the number I want to have happen. So 3 times row 1, the new row 1, add it to row 2, and then replace row 2 with those answers. Okay, so what I've done effectively is made a 0 in that bottom left corner. Perfect. Now, I have to keep going with the math here. So this is where it gets a little tricky. This is where a calculator will come into play. So now I'm still going with the same process because I have to do this for every number. I have to take, so I'm on to the next number here, this one. Taking this row times 3 and adding it to row 2. So 1.5 times 3. There we go. So I'm taking 3 times 1.5 and adding it to the negative 4. So 3 times 1.5 is 4.5, and then adding it to a negative 4 and getting 0.5. Okay, we're going to keep going. 3 times this number and adding it to that number. So 5.5 times 3 is 16.5, and adding it to a negative 13 and getting 3.5. That's the new row 2. Again, how I got this row, I am taking the new row 1 times 3 and adding it to row 2, the row 2 that was up above. Okay, that's a lot. Now, I'm at this current matrix stage, and I'm just, these things that are written down here, these are just my notes to remember what I'm doing, so you can kind of see. All right, let's keep going here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make, let's switch up the color again. I want to make this number now the number 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double the entire row 2. So I'm going to take row 2 and double it and replace row 2 now. So what's going to happen here is the row 1 is staying the same. Oh, I found my dead spot. There we go. Stupid dead spot on this iPad. 1.5 and 5.5. All right. So, doubling the bottom row, doubling 0, that's 0, doubling 0.5, I get 1, doubling the next number, that should be the number 7. 3.5 times 2 is 7. Now, why I wanted that is because what I talked about earlier, I want to get this to reduced row echelon form where this is the matrix I want to get to. 1, 0, 0, 1, and then numbers over here. And I've already got this part here, this number first. I got this number second, and now I already got this 1 for the third part. So I'm kind of going in a horseshoe shape. The last thing I need to do is make this 0 right there. That's my last step. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, so watch how this works. So these are my notes I'm keeping out to the side. I'm going to take row 2 now. This is row 2. That's row 2 right here. This is row 2. I'm going to take it times negative 1.5, add that to the current row 1, and replace row 1. Okay, so I'm taking negative 1.5 times row 2, adding it to row 1, and replacing row 1. Now, why I'm doing that? Because watch. 0 times negative 1.5 is 0. Adding it up here and replacing row 1, this will make the number 1 still, what you see up here. Because it didn't change, right? 0 times anything is 0. Add it to the top number, I get 1 still. So that's perfect. Okay? Negative 1.5 times 1 is negative 1.5. I add it to the top row, so I get 0 and replace that up above. So boom, there's that number. And now, I still have to keep following, negative 1.5 times this number, which negative 1.5 times 7 is negative 10.5. I'm going to add it to the row up above it and replace it. So currently, this is where I'm at. So 7 times negative 1.5, again, a negative 10.5. I'm going to add it to the 5.5 up above it, and it makes a negative 5. And there you go. There is my final answer there if my iPad would work. What is going on there? Okay. And so this, what you're looking at right here, this is the answer. These are my answers. This is my X. There's my answer for it. This is my Y. There's the answer for it. That solves the system on the original problem. Now I'm gonna show you that it does actually work. So let's go ahead and let's get rid of this part right here. So that was just the same matrix. And again, you're probably thinking, Ward, I'm never going to do this, but your calculator does it for you automatically. I'll show you that here in a minute. And so I'm going to just take one of these equations here and just show you. So I'm going to take the X. My X was a negative 5. My Y was a 7. And hopefully this will make an 11 here. So this makes 21. This makes a negative 10, and sure enough, if you add those together, boom, you get 11. So it is actually working. These numbers are actually the solutions to this problem. Now you're thinking, okay, Ward, how is this working? Like, what is it doing? It's basically solving a system like you did in Algebra 1 class, okay? The original stuff that we've always done. And it's just applying it to matrix, and you're starting to see like how you manipulate each number one at a time, and it eventually always works out to be this pattern. Now I'm showing you on a 2x2 because it's kind of easier on this one, but if you went to a 3x3, there's a huge process for doing that. But this is the idea. So I'm going to go through another one of these, and then we'll kind of see how that works. Now again, these could be story problems, right? This could be, maybe the story problem that I go back to this original problem up here. Maybe this problem is that you're buying two t-shirts and 3 pairs of jeans, and you're spending $11. Maybe there's some incredible sale going on. And these are the prices for each of these. It doesn't make sense for my numbers, but you get the idea what a story problem could be. The X and Y can be the prices on the whatever items you have, and you're trying to figure out what they work out because maybe you have receipts from 2 different customers, and you're trying to figure out what the prices were, and they're not telling you. Okay, next one. This might be actually my last problem, because once you see a couple of these, you just solve them the same way every single time, and I'll show you how to type it in the calculator here in a minute. I'm going to get rid of this little camera here so you don't see me, and so you can just see the work. I'm going to do it the exact same way and just show you how it works. So, all right, let's jump right in here. Let's get rid of the camera here. Okay, so I'm going to make this an augmented matrix. So it's 2, negative 5, and 31, and that's behind that wall. Then negative 3, the 7, and then negative 45. And we're going to solve this. So I'll keep little notes so you can kind of see how it's working. I'll write those down below. Again, remember, the goal of this problem is to get it to this form. And then there's going to be numbers over here, and those will be the answers for X and Y. That's what we want to get to, so I'm going to work my way all the way to there. All right, so let's kind of go through the list here. So the first step I want to do is make that first row a 1. I want to make this row the number 1 right where the 2's at. Because I want to start here, then work to the 0, then work to this number, then work to that number. That's the order I'm going to go in, so it's like a horseshoe. Okay, so top row, I'm going to take half of row 1 and replace row 1. Okay, so if I do this correctly, this will make a 1 because I cut it in half. The next number is negative 2.5, and then 31 cut in half. What is 31 divided by 2 is, let's see, 31 divided by 2, that's 15.5, so 15.5. All right, there we go. All right, now, the next thing I want to do is I want to make this number the number 0. So I'm going to do this at the exact same time. So now what I'm doing is I'm using my new row 1. I'm going to take row 1 that's currently right here. So keep that in mind. I'm using the new row 1 that we've just replaced. I'm going to take it times 3 and add it to row 2 and replace row 2. So watch how this works. So let me get rid of my little arrow here. So I'm right here. I'm going to change my color up. I'm right here. I'm taking this times 3 and then adding it to this one. So 3 times 1 is 3. Add it to negative 3, I get 0. Perfect. Boom. That's what I want because I'm replacing row 2. 3 times the negative 2.5. So negative 2.5 times 3 is negative 7.5. I'm going to add it to the 7 up here. So I get a negative 0.5. Next one, I'm taking the 3 times the 15.5. That's 46.5. And I'm going to add it to the negative 45 up above. So I get 1.5. So there's all my numbers so far. It's really kind of working out to be the same numbers I had last time. And again, these are just seriously random problems I picked out of the textbook. Yeah, it's kind of unique that these are working out the way that they're doing. All right, so far so good. So I've got to the point where I got a 0 in that bottom corner. I got a number, a 1 in the top right. So now the next step, if I'm kind of highlighting here, I want to get this number to be a 1. So I'm gonna take row 2, and there's row 2. I'm gonna take it times negative 2 and replace row 2 because I want to get a 1 there. So 0 times negative 2 is 0. Perfect. So this is what's happening. Row 1 isn't changing at all in this step. So 0 times negative 2 is still 0. Negative 2 times negative 0.5 ends up being a positive 1. Perfect. And then negative 2 times 1.5 is negative 3. So currently, I can go up here and already answer that first step. What is the number over here? This ends up being a negative 3. That's my y number. I'm already at that step. I can already answer that because you can see it down here. All right, now I need to make a 0 right here. So to do that, I'm going to take taking row 2 times negative 2.5, actually a positive 2.5, and I'm going to add it to row 1 and replace row 1. So row 2, if I take 0, so let me change up colors here. If I take 0 times 2.5 and I add it to the top one, I'll get a 1. So boom, you can see right there. Good. 2.5 times this 1, add it to the top row, I get 0. So boom, that's sitting right here. You can see it. Boom, it's 0. Because 2.5 times 1 is 2.5 added to the negative 2.5, you get 0. Perfect. 2.5 times this number, adding it to the top. So positive 2.5. 2.5 times negative 3 is negative 7.5. I add it to the 15.5. And the top number ends up being an 8. Perfect 8. So that number goes here. And there's your answers. This is the answer for X. The top one is. This is the answer for Y. And if I plug it into the original problem, it should work out. It's a tedious process. Now again, this could be any type of problem here. It's one of those things that this could be anything. It could be a story problem. You can make them, into matrices like this. It works on a 3x3. You just have to do the same steps. You just have to do it more and more and more and more. You'd follow the exact same steps I'm doing here. But again, your calculators do this automatically. It has an RREF button that will do this, and it will reduce everything for you automatically. It might take a few seconds if you have a very old model like my calculator is, but it will do it, and it'll just spit out the answers like you're seeing here. It'll actually spit out matrices just like this, which is really kind of a cool concept. Now, one of the things I really haven't talked about to this point was how do you even type it in a calculator, or how do you type it in like Wolfram Alpha? Because obviously you don't have the luxury of like a matrix key on a keyboard. So, if I go to the next problem here, on my iPad. I want to just show you kind of how would you make this, and this would be my last problem. I'm not going to do the whole problem. I just want to show you how you type it in a calculator. So how you type this in a calculator is, you know, this would be the matrix that we're looking at here. Okay, so this would be my matrix. How you type this in a calculator, it's written like this. You're going to use a lot of brackets. So the bracket, you have a normal bracket key in your calculator. If it's not there, you can go through the menus and figure out what the bracket is. And then this is how you're going to do it. You're going to do a bracket 3, comma, -1, comma, -11, and then close the bracket. Because what that'll do, that's row 1. And then next thing you do is you put another bracket, 2, comma, 3, comma, 11, bracket, and then bracket. And then that would be row 2. It automatically knows that you're doing a matrix if you're typing it in. You don't have to put a comma between those. You just keep going. It'll just keep figuring out that those are the next rows. And this is probably how it would spit it out in most graphing calculators. This is how you type it in Wolfram Alpha, and it knows that it wants a matrix in this form. In fact, I think you can even go on Wolfram Alpha and just type in the word matrix, and then it'll give you a bunch of options in the drop-down menu for typing stuff in. And then obviously you just, you know, on most calculators, you're looking for an RREF on a graphing calculator. It's called a reduced row echelon form. It gets down to that just perfect equation where it's going down to this, what we call the unit matrix, the 1, 0, 0, 1, and then it gives you all the answers. So it's kind of cool concept. It does it in a few seconds. In fact, let me type it in here just so you can see it, so you can see me actually type this. So I'm going to go into my matrix button. So so here, it does have a matrix key there. Maybe if it focuses there. There's a matrix key. I'm going to hit it. So this is like the menu. Clear. Gotta hit the little shift matrix key. All right. And so it's asking for like what type of matrix it is. Now I have a bunch already typed in, so I can clear some of these out. I'm going to clear some of these matrices out. But I'm going to, let's say I edit one. So I'm going to hit enter under matrix A. And so matrix A, I've already had it entered before. So if you want to see this, this is what matrix A was. My calculator is actually showing you like a bunch. This matrix was super big. It was 4 by something. 4 rows. You can see all the rows. It's using brackets and all that good stuff to like really organize them. So this is really kind of messy because I have to use the arrow keys. You can see the dot off to the side because I have more. But I'm going to go into the matrix button, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to edit. So I'm going to use my little arrows to go up above, as you can see here, and there. And I'm going to scroll over to edit. I'm going to edit that first one. So I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to edit the first matrix, as you can see there. And so I'm going to make this matrix a 2 row by 3 columns. So 2 by 3. So 2 enter, 3 enter. And so it made it a 2 by 3 matrix, as you can see here. And then I'm going to enter the matrix you see right here. So 3, -1, 11, 2. And all I do is I hit the numbers and hit enter, and I'll just move on to the next one. It goes by rows. So 3, enter, -1, enter, -11, enter. So you can see it's automatically typing my numbers here. The second row is 2, enter, 3, enter, and 11, enter. So boom, there's my matrix already entered. So this is matrix A. So it's good to know what matrix this is. Okay, so now I'm gonna clear out of this. I'm gonna exit out of this. So quit. All right. So I'm back to my main screen on my calculator. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna type in. I'm gonna go into my matrix math buttons here. So I'm gonna click the little math button here, and I can scroll over and I can do a bunch of different things for like for reduced row echelon form. So if I scroll down, it'll give me options I can do, and you can kind of see the types of stuff you can do in each category. And you're looking for reduced row echelon form, RREF, and it's in one of these menus. Now sometimes it's in like this weird hidden menu, and sometimes it's not. So for my calculator, if you have this exact model, this is TI-84 Plus, but it's going to be in one of those menus. For me, I believe it's actually in the matrix. So I'm going to hit the little shift. I'm going to hit the little matrix button. So it goes into matrix. And if I go over, you can see the category there. It says math. If I go over, it'll show me all the options I can do with matrices. That's how this one's pre-programmed. Usually it's in a math menu or something. So I can go down and I can kind of figure out the different versions. I'm looking for RREF, so I'm going to hit the little down arrow so you can see this. Let's see if it has it. RREF, there it is. RREF, that's the one I want. So I'm going to hit enter. So RREF, and now I got to go find matrix A. So I'm going to go into that same matrix menu. So it brings up all my matrices, and now it's selecting A, so I'm going to hit enter again. And boom, it's saying RREF to matrix A. Again, that was just in the matrix menu. That's how this calculator is pre-programmed. So I'm going to hit enter, and what it's doing is it automatically solved it. And it put it in brackets, and it put it automatically in rows for me. So this calculator is pre-programmed to do that. So what it actually did is it's telling me in matrix form that, if I can read that, it's telling me the first row is 1, 0, negative 2, and the second row is 0, 1, 5. And these are the answers for X and Y, and it automatically does it for you. It's kind of a cool setup, how these calculators work. It's kind of impressive, because that's some serious math that it's doing. Sorry. Let's see. There. All right. But yeah, it's some serious math. But again, thank you for all those who are actively participating each week. I know some of you are very, very dedicated in doing this still. But again, take care of yourself, stay healthy, stay safe, and I hope to see you real soon.